Hi Year 4 and welcome to today's extended writing lesson. The focus is on poetry about hedgehogs, as you may have gathered given the images on the screen in front of you. So the first thing that I'd like you to do, and this sheet is in your pack, is to mind map what you know about hedgehogs. Now, many of you will have seen hedgehogs in your gardens, or you might have seen them out and about, maybe down 7 acres or somewhere like that. Or you'll certainly might have seen programs about hedgehogs, or you will have seen hedgehogs in some other capacity, maybe even via a book, for example, such as a Hodgehog, etc., etc. So if you can write down what you already know or think you know about hedgehogs, pause now and have a go at that task. Right then, so the actual writing part of today, the genre focus is on poetry. So having a look at what poetry is. Now, poetry is literacy work which involves the expression of feelings, emotions, and ideas using a range of stylistic features such as rhyme and onomatopoeia. Don't worry, I'm going to go through what they are in just a minute. Poetry at its simplest is just playing with words to give information in an interesting, fun manner. Okay, it's all about the delivery in poetry. So here's my really poor example. There was an old teacher on Zoom who had left his brew in his room. Whilst live on air, he abandoned all there until slurp, he was happy again. My apologies, I'll do better next time. So, features of poetry. One of the first things that comes to people's mind are rhyming couplets. So that's the end of two sentences which sound the same. So, for example, rat and mat, round and sound, dog and frog. So if I have a look on this, if you look at my piece of rather dodgy poetry, there was an old teacher on Zoom who had left his brew in his room. So Zoom and room, okay, they rhyme with each other, therefore they're a rhyming couplet. Whilst live on air, he abandoned all there. So air and there, they rhyme with each other because the sound is exactly the same at the end of each word. So onomatopoeia, rather big word, incredibly difficult to spell, but actually you will have seen this time and time and time again. You might just not know that it's called onomatopoeia. Basically, they are words that sound the same as they're spelt. So they're often noises. So for example, crash, bang, boom, slurp, okay? And if you have a look at my effort there, until slurp, he was happy again. So slurp is my onomatopoeia. It's a sound word that is spelt exactly the same way that it sounds. Now, alliteration. Alliteration is where you get consecutive words that start with the same letter. So every word starts with the same letter, one after another. So Peter Piper picked a pickled pepper, and she sells seashells by the seashore. The shells she sells are seashells, I'm sure. My apologies. I hope to do better. But you can see the repetition of P, 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 and then S, 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 and so on. That's alliteration. Similes. Now, we've covered similes before, so this shouldn't be too much of an issue for people. But similes compare things directly to other things, using the words as or like. So, for example, as fast as a cheetah or as spiky as a brush. So, spiky as a brush might be quite useful when you're writing about hedgehogs. Personification. Again, we've covered this year. It is given human characteristics to non-human things. So, for example, the house watched the people walk by. A house can't watch people walk by because it doesn't have eyes. The tree stood guard by the park entrance. Again, human characteristics to non-human things. Verbs and adverbs. Now, verbs are doing or being words. They're action words. So you do need verbs within your poem. Adverbs describe how they're done. They usually end in the suffix ly, okay? So Mr. Simmons sipped his brew. So, I never changed that. My apologies. So that really should say sipped is the verb. I put drank, but Mr. Simmons drank his brew. Doesn't really matter. Mr. Simmons slowly drank his brew. Slowly describes how I drunk my brew. Okay? My apologies there. So, what are you going to be doing today? Well, it's a bit different to your normal just making up a poetry off the spot. What we need is information. Because it's okay asking you to write a poem about hedgehogs if you actually don't know about hedgehogs. So, I'm not going to do that for you because that would defeat the object. So I'm going to give you something similar. So here's one that I did about snakes a couple of years back. So what you've got on the left-hand side there is a fact file about snakes. So it's a non-chronological report on snakes, and it's full of scientific vocabulary. So basic facts about snakes. Snakes are elongated, limbless, flexible reptiles. There are about 2,900 species of snakes. Of these, 375 are venomous. You'll see that I've highlighted the word venomous. Venomous means poisonous, okay? Then I've got diet. Snakes consume a variety of items, including termites, rodents, birds, frogs, small deer, and other reptiles. Snakes eat their prey whole and are able to consume prey 3 times larger than the diameter of their head because their lower jaw can separate from the upper jaw. To keep prey from escaping, snakes have rear-facing teeth that hold their prey in their mouths. Venomous snakes inject their prey with venom, while constrictors squeeze their prey. They do not need to hunt every day. Anacondas and pythons can survive for up to a year without food after feeding. Snakes hunt mostly at night. And I can keep going and going with that. And what you can see is I've gone through it with a highlighter and I've highlighted key information that I might be able to use. So I've highlighted the word venomous, that means poisonous, termites, rodents, frogs, deer, and eat their whole prey, separate their jaw. They are key words about what the snake eats. So I'm going to have part of my poetry is going to be based on what it eats. I go back to the word venom and venomous again. So I'm going to make some sort of reference to the fact that snakes can be poisonous. If we get onto behaviour, I've got flicking its tongue. Snakes use their forked tongue to smell the air. Sunning themselves, because snakes have to heat themselves up in the morning. Snakes hibernate, so that means they sleep during winter, and shed their skin. So I've highlighted some key aspects from that non-chronological report. And then if you move across to the right-hand side, having played around with the words, what you can see is that I've used those words as part of the poem. So my poem on snakes reads like this. Winter's over, now wake, not hibernate. Shed my old coat, a new skin create. A flick of the tongue, a smell of warm air. Time to eat termites, deer, frogs over there. I am a snake, my venom is potent. Come say hello to my fangs, dear rodent. I separate my jaw as wide as can be, swallow it whole, then slither away so others cannot see. So as you can see, I've got the word venom is highlighted in the non-chron report. The word venom is also highlighted in my poetry. The word hibernate is highlighted in the non-chronological report. You can also see I use it in the first line there. So I'm using key scientific words from the non-chron report to create my poem. But you'll also notice I've tried to keep some of those features of the poetry. So for example, hibernate and create. There and air. They're rhyming couplets or near rhyming couplets. Potent and rodent. Again, not perfect, but it works. So I'm trying to incorporate the features of poetry at the same time. You'll notice that my poem is not very long. This was not written straight away. I used a lot of scrap paper and a lot of playing around with words, and some bits I scrapped and some bits I put back in. Okay, so don't expect to just be able to write it straight off and it work. Have a play around, mess with your ideas and see what you can come up with. But try to use those keywords that you've identified and put those scientific words into your poem. So this is the text that you're going to have today. It's again, this one, you're going to do the same thing that I've done with the snakes, but this time you're going to do it with a hedgehog. So the common name is hedgehog. Its scientific name, you don't really need to include that in your poem. Description, 22 to 28 centimeters long, covered in black and flanks by around 6,000 banded spines. I'd highlight the word spines, okay? Face and underside and coarse greyish brown fur. So you might highlight brown fur or greyish brown fur. Habitat, wide range of habitats in both urban and rural situations. Urban means it lives in towns and cities, rural in the countryside. Absent from large conifer plantations, marshes and moorlands. So basically, they live in most places except where you get loads of conifer trees, where the ground is really marshy and boggy, or where you get moorlands, where it's quite open. Suburban and urban gardens are increasingly important. So basically, you'll find them in your gardens. Diet, grounds dwelling invertebrates, especially worms, beetles, slugs, caterpillars, millipedes, and earwigs. You can do the similar sort of thing to what I did with the snake, but again, do it for the hedgehog. Habits, they're generally solitary. That means they live on their own. Non-territorial, so they're not particularly bothered for other hedgehogs being in that place. Nocturnal means they come out at night. Mobile and wide-ranging, they travel about 1 or 2 kilometers a night. With urban ranges, range sizes involved in many different gardens. They hibernate in the winter. That means they sleep over the winter. They tend to follow linear features when foraging, so fence lines and hedges, and they roll into a ball when threatened. That's so that their spines can protect them. Breeding, they breed between April and September with peak activity in May and June. Courtship involves lots of snorting and barging from the female and perseverance from the male. Mothers may desert of each young. Don't make sense that. My apologies. If disturbed whilst nesting. So may desert, their young if disturbed while nesting. So you've got to leave them alone. Hoglets, it's an interesting name, I try and get that into my poem, emerged from the end of June onwards. Distribution. Hedgehogs are found throughout Western Europe, including mainland Britain and Ireland, but are absent from some Scottish islands. Conservation status. Although relatively common and widespread, there's considerable evidence of dramatic decline in recent years. That is true. As gardens have become more and more closed off, and as hedgerows have been removed, hedgehogs have found it harder to move around. And as a result, they die off. So their numbers have plummeted quite massively. So your job is to go through there and find anything interesting about hedgehogs that you quite like from that text and highlight it. Then what I want you to do then is to record these keywords just into the vocab box. Then use those to play around with your sentences, and then going back to the different features of poetry and try to write a short poem based on hedgehogs, but using those key words. So as you can see here, this is my example. I decided to include 6,000 banded spikes, greyish brown fur, urban and rural, worms, beetles, slugs, caterpillars, millipedes and earwigs, solitary, nocturnal, hibernate in winter and decline. So I'm going to use those keywords then to create my poem. So the next box then, you've got a features of modern and traditional poetry checklist. Now, you don't have to include every single one of those features. Include those that you can get in there and those that you can make work, okay? So I reckon I could get alliteration in there. So each letter, each consecutive word starting with the same letter. I might be able to get a simile in there. And I'm definitely might be able to get onomatopoeia. Ouch, for example, would be a really good one to include if something decides to have a bit of a encounter with the hedgehog spikes. Try and get rhyme in there. Again, just see how you get on. So I had to play around with a sentence then. So, small nocturnal mammal of the night, eating all bugs, slugs, and worms in sight. So, this is an example of an opening sentence that I've played around with. So, I've got the word nocturnal in there, which means it comes out at night time. And I've also got some of what it eats, so bugs, slugs, and worms. So, again, it goes back to its diet, the things that it eats. I've also then got the features of poetry, in this case, rhyme. We've got rhyming couplet. So, I've got night and sight. Okay. So again, these things can be done if you play around with those words. So check as many of those poetry features as you can. Make sure you use the technical vocabulary that you've highlighted in the non-cron report, and then finish off your final draft. And I really do look forward to seeing what you guys come up with. You have got 2 sheets. I've only put one of them on here, but there are 2 hedgehog sheets. You don't have to do both. Choose which sheet you prefer, and you can write your poem on that. Thank you very much. Good luck. I hope to read many of them very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.